I sat at the far end of the long conference table, the one nobody ever really wants to sit at because it feels like you're already half outside the room. The leather chair creaked faintly under me as I shifted, trying to keep my face neutral while Victor Hale's voice filled the space like smoke. He was standing at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up in that practiced way executives do when they want to look both authoritative and one of the team. His words came out calm, almost casual, as if he were merely suggesting where to order lunch. "I've been thinking," Victor said, letting his gaze drift across the room before settling somewhere above my head, "that the timeline on Phoenix could be significantly accelerated if we brought in someone with, let's say, a stronger personal stake in seeing it succeed. Ethan has expressed interest in stepping up. He's young, hungry, and, most importantly, he carries the Hale name. That matters." A ripple of silence rolled through the room. Not the thoughtful kind, the kind that tastes like metal in your mouth. I felt every pair of eyes flicker toward me, then quickly away, the way people avoid looking at someone who's just been slapped in public. My pulse was loud in my ears, but my hands stayed steady on the folder in front of me. I'd known this moment was coming for weeks. I just hadn't expected it to arrive wrapped in such polite corporate violence. Victor finally looked at me directly. There was no apology in his eyes, only the mild curiosity of a man who assumes the chess piece will move itself off the board when asked. I reached into the slim leather portfolio beside me and pulled out the single sheet I'd printed that morning. The paper was still warm from the printer in my office. I'd folded it once, precisely, the way my mother taught me to fold letters when I was a child. I stood up slowly. The sound of my chair sliding back seemed impossibly loud in the hush. I walked the length of the table. 23 steps, I'd counted them once during a particularly boring quarterly review, and stopped in front of Victor. Without a word, I placed the letter flat on the polished wood, right where his hands rested. One sentence typed in crisp 11-point calibri. "I hereby tender my resignation from Carver Hale Group, effective immediately." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "If you believe Ethan is the right person to lead Phoenix," I said, meeting his eyes without blinking, "then the project already belongs to you. I won't stand in the way of family tradition." Someone, maybe Priya from finance, made a small, involuntary sound in her throat. Otherwise, the room stayed deathly quiet. Victor's mouth opened, closed again. For the first time in the 3 years I'd worked under him, he looked genuinely surprised. Not angry, not yet, just surprised, as though he hadn't actually expected the pawn to leave the board entirely. I turned to face Julian Carver, the founder, the only person in the room whose opinions still had the power to make my stomach twist. Julian's face was unreadable, the way it always was when he was thinking 3 moves ahead. His fingers were steepled under his chin. He studied me for a long moment, long enough that I began to wonder whether he was going to let me walk out of here with my dignity intact, or whether he was about to deliver the final, graceful cut. Then he spoke, voice low and even. "Lena, my office. 10 minutes." It wasn't a request. I nodded once, turned on my heel, and left the boardroom without looking back. The glass door closed behind me with a soft, pneumatic sigh. Out in the corridor, the air felt colder, sharper. My heels clicked against the marble like gunfire in an empty church. I had no idea what Julian wanted to say. I only knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, I was no longer playing their game. I still remember the day I landed in Portland, back in the late spring of 2016, suitcase in one hand and a single job offer letter clutched in the other. The city smelled like rain-soaked cedar and coffee, even though it barely rained that week. I was 27, fresh off a grueling master's program in Singapore, and convinced that if I worked hard enough, the world would eventually notice. Portland felt like the right place to start proving it. Smaller than Seattle, less cutthroat than San Francisco, but still buzzing with that Pacific Northwest mix of ambition and quiet idealism. I started at Carver Hale Group as a junior project coordinator on the Phoenix Initiative, back when it was just a whiteboard sketch and a lot of caffeine-fueled optimism. My first boss was Claire Tran, a no-nonsense Vietnamese-American woman in her late 40s who'd built half the company's early analytics backbone with her bare hands. Claire saw something in me right away. She didn't coddle. She challenged. "You're smart, Lena," she'd say after I'd stayed up 3 nights straight debugging a forecasting model, "but smart isn't enough. You have to be relentless." Under her, I learned how to turn raw data into stories that made executives sit up straight. She praised me publicly, defended my ideas in meetings, and once even told Victor Hale, in front of the entire leadership team, that I was the reason we'd shaved 3 months off the beta rollout. I still carry that moment like a medal I never earned. Then the pandemic hit. March 2020, the office emptied overnight. Claire adapted faster than anyone. She turned our scattered team into a virtual machine, Slack channels humming at all hours, Zoom calls that felt more like war rooms than check-ins. I worked from a tiny apartment in southeast Portland, the kind with creaky hardwood floors and windows that rattled when the MAX train went by. My desk was the kitchen table, my office chair a yoga ball I'd bought on impulse. I barely left the building for months. Groceries delivered to the lobby, masks on for the 5-minute walk to the mailbox. The city outside felt frozen. Downtown Portland turned ghostly, storefronts boarded up, the bridges eerily quiet. But inside my apartment, the work never stopped. We pushed Phoenix forward through sheer willpower. I led late-night sprints to integrate new remote collaboration features, rewrote entire sections of the user onboarding flow when user testing showed people were dropping off in droves from isolation fatigue. Claire called me her anchor. When the rest of the team was burning out, I kept showing up. 12-hour days bleeding into 14, on weekends blurring into weekdays. By the time vaccines started rolling out in early 2021, Phoenix had not just survived, it had become one of the company's few bright spots in a brutal year. Claire left in the summer of 2022, poached by a Seattle unicorn with a better title and twice the equity. She hugged me goodbye in the nearly empty office and whispered, "Don't let them dim your light, kid." I promised I wouldn't. That's when Victor Hale really started paying attention. At first, it was indifference. He'd nod at my updates and meetings without really listening, skim my reports and hand them back with a single word. Fine. But indifference slowly curdled into something colder. I noticed it in small ways. The way he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to ask Ethan's opinion instead. Even though Ethan had only been with the company 6 months and spent most of his time strategizing on golf courses, Victor began referring to my work as solid execution, while calling Ethan's half-baked ideas visionary. The shift was subtle, quiet, almost deniable, but it was there. Then Ethan arrived properly, not as an intern or a summer analyst, but as Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives. 25, Ivy League polish, and the unmistakable confidence of someone who'd never had to prove he belonged. Victor introduced him as bringing fresh eyes and new energy. What that really meant was permission to rewrite history. The changes started small, almost invisible. A slide deck I'd spent weeks perfecting would come back with Ethan's name added to the authorship line. My mind quietly removed or moved to contributors in tiny font at the bottom. Reports I'd authored would be reissued under his signature with minor wording tweaks, enough to claim ownership without anyone calling it plagiarism. He'd present my analysis in board meetings as if it had sprung fully formed from his mind, while I sat in the back row taking notes like a junior again. Once I watched him take credit for a pivot I'd fought for 6 months earlier, the one that saved us from a multi-million-dollar misallocation. Victor beamed. No one corrected the record. I kept my head down. I told myself it was temporary, that real work speaks for itself, that Claire's lessons would carry me through. But each erasure chipped away at something inside me. The late nights felt heavier. The winds tasted like ash. I started keeping private logs, Screenshots, version histories, email trails, not out of pettiness, but survival. Proof that I had been there, that the ideas had been mine first. By the time I walked into that boardroom with my resignation letter, the erosion had been going on for years. 10 years since I first stepped off the plane in Portland. 10 years of building, adapting, enduring. And in the end, the quietest damage wasn't the pandemic or the long hours. It was watching the credit, the respect, the very shape of my contribution get slowly, methodically taken away. I wasn't angry when I stood up in that meeting. Not anymore. I was finished. The team meeting that afternoon was supposed to be routine, a quick sync on the Phoenix Phase 3 roadmap, 15 minutes tops. I'd prepared a short slide deck the night before, nothing flashy. I'd just cleaned data visualizations showing how we could optimize user retention by tweaking the onboarding sequence based on the last quarter's A/B tests. I'd run the numbers myself, cross-checked with engineering, and even gotten informal buy-in from the product lead. It was solid. It was mine. Ethan walked in 5 minutes late, coffee in hand, flashing that easy smile that always seemed to disarm the room before he even spoke. He slid into the seat across from me, opened his laptop, and, without preamble, pulled up a deck that looked eerily familiar. My deck. Except now the title slide read, Phoenix Onboarding Optimization, a Fresh Perspective, and his name sat bolded at the top. He started presenting. "Here's what I've been thinking," he said, clicking through slides I'd designed, data I'd crunched, recommendations I'd fought to get approved. He spoke with the relaxed confidence of someone who'd invented the ideas on the spot. We pivot the sequence like this, front-load the value prop, cut the tutorial fluff, and we could see a 12 to 15% lift in day one retention. Simple, but high impact. The room nodded along. A few people murmured agreement. I sat there, fingers laced tightly in my lap, feeling heat rise behind my eyes. Not rage, not yet, just a cold, sinking realization that this was happening in real time, out in the open. When he finished, Mariah, who sat 2 chairs down, shot me a quick sideways glance. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Later, in the kitchenette while the coffee machine hissed, she leaned close and whispered, "Lena, that was your deck. Word for word on slide 4. He didn't even change the color scheme." I managed a small, tight smile. "I noticed." Min caught me in the hallway afterward, pretending to check his phone so no one would think twice about us talking. "You okay?" he asked under his breath. Because that was straight-up theft. And Victor was in the back nodding like Ethan just cured cancer. "I'm fine," I lied, "just taking notes." And I was. Literally. That evening, I started a new folder on my personal drive. Encrypted, time-stamped, backed up to an external I kept at home. Every email thread where I'd first proposed the onboarding changes, every version history from the shared drive showing my last edit dates, every Slack message where I'd shared early mock-ups, then screenshots of the original deck before Ethan's refresh, meeting minutes where my name had been attached to the work, before they mysteriously vanished in later recaps. I wasn't paranoid, not yet. I was methodical. Victor's shift became more blatant after that. In the all-hands the following week, he stood at the front of the room, sleeves rolled, voice carrying that paternal warmth he reserved for moments like this. "We're seeing real momentum on Phoenix," he said, beaming toward Ethan. "And a lot of that comes down to fresh thinking. Ethan's bringing exactly the kind of youthful energy and bold perspective we need right now. Sometimes the old methods, reliable as they are, start to feel a little dated. We have to stay agile." He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. The implication hung in the air like humidity before a storm. A few heads turned my way, then quickly away. I kept my expression neutral, pen moving steadily across my notebook as if I were simply capturing action items. But inside, something cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a hairline fracture running through years of quiet endurance. I walked out of that all hands and straight to my desk, opened the encrypted folder, added a new entry. All hands October 17th, 2025. Victor public praise of youthful energy versus dated methods. Timestamp 11:42 a.m. Audio clip saved separately. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling for a long minute. The whispers from Min and Mariah weren't just warnings anymore. They were confirmation. The game had changed, and I was finally keeping score. The email landed in my inbox at 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday in late November. Subject line: Phoenix Phase 3 Board Update, Final for Review. Sender: Victor Hale. CC'd to the entire executive team, including Julian Carver. I opened it expecting the usual polished summary I'd helped draft 2 weeks earlier. My fingerprints were supposed to be all over it. The risk matrix I'd built from scratch, the mitigation timelines I'd negotiated with legal, the conservative revenue projections I'd insisted on after the last client feedback session showed warning signs. Instead, what loaded on my screen was something entirely different. The report had been gutted and rebuilt overnight. Every instance of my name had vanished. The authorship footer now read, "Prepared by Ethan Hale, Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives." The executive summary opened with, "Under Ethan's refreshed leadership, Phoenix has achieved key milestones ahead of internal benchmarks." My painstakingly documented 18% retention improvement, reattributed to innovative onboarding redesign led by Ethan, the critical dependency delays we'd flagged with 3 major vendors, repackaged as lingering effects of outdated legacy processes that are now being modernized under new direction. Worst of all, the risk section, my risk section, had been rewritten to downplay the exposure. The clause I'd fought to include about potential breach of contract penalties if we missed the Q1 delivery window? Gone. In its place, a breezy paragraph assuring the board that any residual timeline slippage is attributable to entrenched workflows no longer fit for purpose. No mention of the vendor disputes. No mention of the contingency budget I'd quietly secured, just a clean, confident narrative that painted Ethan as the savior and me as the architect of obsolescence. I sat staring at the screen until the words blurred. My coffee went cold in the mug beside me. By 9:15, the monthly board prep call was already underway. I joined from my office, camera off at first, just listening. Victor presented the deck live, voice smooth and paternal. And thanks to Ethan's bold re-architecture of our approach, we're not only back on track but positioned to exceed expectations. The old methods, reliable in their time, simply couldn't keep pace with today's market velocity. Modernization was overdue, and Ethan delivered it. A few approving murmurs from the line. Then Victor paused, almost theatrically. "Any questions before we lock this for the board packet?" I unmuted. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Victor, there are a couple of points in the risk section that don't reflect the current reality. The vendor delays aren't the result of outdated processes. They stem from scope changes approved last quarter after Ethan's pivot. We flagged the contract exposure in the October 29th memo I sent to you and legal. Removing that warning could put us at material risk if the client enforces the penalty clause. We're talking 7 figures. Silence stretched across the line. Not thoughtful silence. The kind that feels like everyone is holding their breath. Victor cleared his throat. "Lena, appreciate the diligence, but we're focused on forward momentum here. The board needs confidence, not cautionary footnotes. We can address contingencies operationally. What we can't afford is to stay tethered to yesterday's playbook." Ethan's voice cut in, light and almost cheerful. "Exactly. We're modernizing, Lena. The data speaks for itself. Look at the early lift we're already seeing." I opened my mouth to push back, mention the actual data source, my model, remind them of the signed-off contingency plan, but Victor spoke over me. "Let's move on. Julian, any final thoughts before we send?" Julian Carver had been silent the entire call, the way he often was until the last possible second. His video was on, but his face stayed impassive. the eyes flicking between faces on the grid like someone reading a chessboard. He let the pause linger just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Then, quietly, "Send it as is." No elaboration, no defense of me, no challenge to Victor. Just 3 words that landed like a gavel. The call ended 30 seconds later. I stayed on the line after everyone dropped, staring at the meeting-ended screen until it timed out. My hands were trembling, not from anger, not anymore, but from the sheer mechanical effort it took to keep breathing normally. Back at my desk, I opened the encrypted folder I'd been maintaining for months. New entry. November 24th, 2025. Phoenix Board Update v Final. Authorship reassigned to Ethan. Risk disclosures removed. Victor attributes delays to outdated processes. Julian approves distribution without comment. Timestamp 0937 PST. PDF attached plus screenshot of original draft comparison. I attached the side-by-side diff I'd run that morning, red lines showing every excision, every reattribution. The differences were surgical. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The report would go to the board tomorrow. My name erased. My warnings silenced. My work claimed. And Julian, my last remaining ally in that room, had chosen to say nothing. That was the moment I understood something irreversible had shifted. They weren't just sidelining me anymore. They were erasing me. And the board would read the version they wanted to believe. 10 minutes after the boardroom emptied, I knocked once on the frosted glass door of Julian Carver's corner office and stepped inside without waiting for an answer. The space always felt smaller than it looked from the hallway. Dark walnut paneling, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River, a single Eames chair opposite his desk that seemed deliberately uncomfortable, as if designed to remind visitors this wasn't a social call. Julian was already standing by the window, hands in his pockets, watching a barge slide under the Hawthorne Bridge. He didn't turn right away. When he did, his expression was the same unreadable mask he'd worn on the call earlier that morning. "Sit," he said. I took the chair. My resignation letter was still folded in my blazer pocket. I hadn't decided whether to hand it over again or let the one on the conference table speak for itself. Julian moved behind his desk but didn't sit. He leaned forward, palms flat on the wood, and studying me the way he studied quarterly forecasts, slow, deliberate, searching for the one variable that didn't fit. "You're leaving," he said, not a question. "Yes." "Because of Victor." "Because of the pattern," I corrected. "The credit theft started small. It's not small anymore. The latest board report erased 3 years of my work and replaced it with Ethan's name. The risk disclosures I wrote, disclosures that could save the company 7 figures in penalties, were scrubbed. Victor called my methods dated. You approved the version that lied by omission." Julian didn't flinch. He simply nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "I read both versions," he said. "Yours and the one that went out." The admission hung between us. I felt my pulse steady for the first time in weeks. "Then why did you let it go through?" He exhaled through his nose, the sound almost a laugh without humor. "Because I needed Victor to think he'd won this round. Completely. Irreversibly." I waited. Julian walked to the credenza behind his desk, opened a shallow drawer, and pulled out a single white business card. No logo. Just clean black type. Crestline Partners, Private Investment and Advisory Rebecca Lang, Managing Director, a phone number, and an email beneath it. He slid the card across the desk toward me. "Crestline has been quietly circling Carver Hale for 18 months, he said. "They're not hostile, they're surgical. They want minority stake, board seats, operational oversight. Victor thinks he can keep them at arm's length with flashy numbers and Ethan's fresh perspective. He's wrong." I picked up the card. The paper stock was heavy, expensive. "Rebecca Lang was my classmate at Stanford," Julian continued. "She doesn't tolerate cooked books. If Crestline comes in, and they will, they'll demand forensic audits. Every version history, every email trail, every red line. Victor's alterations won't survive scrutiny, but neither will the company if the truth comes out in open court or a leaked whistleblower report. Reputation is currency here. We can't afford the scandal. He finally sat, leaning back, fingers steepled. That's where you come in. I met his eyes. You're asking me to leave so I can... I'm asking you to step outside the blast radius, he said. You stay here. You become the disgruntled employee who stayed too long. Your evidence looks like sour grapes. You walk away cleanly now, resignation in hand. No drama. You become an unimpeachable source. Crestline will want to talk to you. Rebecca will protect your identity until the moment it matters. When they ask for the truth about Phoenix, about the numbers, about who really built what, you tell them, with your logs, your timestamps, your side-by-sides. You don't have to accuse anyone. You just have to be accurate. I turned the card over in my fingers, blank on the back. And in return? You get a soft landing, he said. Crestline isn't a competitor. They're investors. Rebecca's already cleared a role. Senior advisor, portfolio operations. Remote to start, Portland-based if you want to stay. Six-figure base, meaningful carry, and, most important, no Victor Hale anywhere in the reporting line. Silence settled again. Outside, the river kept moving, indifferent. Why now? I asked. Why not 6 months ago when the credit grabs started? Or last year when Ethan rewrote my entire vendor strategy deck? Julian's gaze drifted back to the window. Because 6 months ago I still hoped Victor would course correct. Last year I still believed family loyalty could coexist with fiduciary duty. I was wrong on both counts. The board report this morning was the line. He crossed it, publicly, with my tacit approval. That ends here. He looked at me again, and for the first time in years I saw something close to regret in his eyes. I should have spoken up sooner. I didn't. That's on me. But I can give you an exit that preserves your reputation and positions you to do real damage to the lie, without torching the company I built. I slipped the card into my pocket next to the resignation letter. I'll think about it, I said. Think fast, he replied. Victor's already scheduling celebratory drinks with the board tomorrow night. He thinks the Phoenix narrative is locked. Let him keep thinking that a little longer. I stood. So did he. At the door, I paused. If I do this, I said, it's not for Crestline. It's not even for you. It's for the work. The real work. The kind that doesn't get erased because someone's son needs a win. Julian gave the smallest nod. Then we understand each other. I walked out. The door closed behind me with the same soft pneumatic sigh as the boardroom. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted folder one more time. New entry. November 25th, 2025. Private meeting with Julian Carver. Offered advisory role at Crestline Partners as protected exit. Confirmed suspicion of Victor falsifying reports. Strategy. Allow narrative to solidify before forensic review. Card received, decision pending. I hit save. The elevator dinged at the lobby. Outside, Portland was already dark, streetlights smearing gold across wet pavement. I stepped into the rain. For the first time in months, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Not gone. Just movable. I signed the short-term consulting agreement on December 3, 2025, in the back booth of a quiet coffee shop on the edge of the Pearl District. Sarah Nguyen slid the single-page contract across the table between our lattes. No fanfare, no lengthy onboarding. Just her signature already in place, a crisp line in black ink, and a space for mine. Sarah was Crestline's lead due diligence partner on the Carver-Hale file. Mid-40s, sharp eyes behind minimalist frames. I'm the kind of person who could read a 200-page financial packet in 20 minutes and tell you exactly where the bodies were buried. She didn't waste words. 3-month engagement, renewable if needed, she said. Remote, Portland-based. Your title is Senior Portfolio Advisor, Operations and Compliance. You report to me. No one else needs to know you're working with us until we're ready. Non-disclosure is ironclad on both sides." I signed. My hand didn't shake. The next morning I received encrypted access to Crestline's secure data room. A folder labeled CHG, Phoenix Forensic Review, waited for me. Inside, zipped archives of Carver Hale's internal servers, pulled under subpoena-grade privilege after Crestline exercised its preliminary investment rights and demanded full transparency. Victor had fought it, of course. He lost. I started with the obvious, the Phoenix Project folders. What I found wasn't subtle. The first red flag was the version histories. My original files, deck drafts, financial models, vendor contracts, risk registers, had been duplicated, then systematically altered. Timestamps showed the changes happening after hours, mostly from Ethan's laptop IP range. Names scrubbed, dates backdated, numbers rounded up in ways that made margins look healthier than they were. One revenue forecast I'd modeled conservatively at 11 to 14% growth for Q2 2026 had been rewritten to project 28 to 32%. The Excel formulas had been manually overridden. The original cells were still there, hidden behind conditional formatting that turned them white on white. Then came the budget transfers. I traced a series of journal entries dated between August and November 2025. Six-figure sums, $1.2 million in total, had been quietly reallocated from Phoenix's core development budget to a line item labeled Strategic Innovation Initiatives. No supporting documentation, no approval chain beyond Ethan's electronic signature and Victor's countersign. The destination account? A sub-project Ethan had quietly spun up in September. Phoenix Next Gen UX Overhaul. I'd never heard of it. No one on the core team had, but the invoices attached were real. Consulting fees to a boutique design firm in San Francisco, luxury software licenses, even travel expenses for stakeholder alignment retreats in Napa. The money hadn't gone to innovation. It had gone to optics, to building Ethan's personal portfolio of wins, while Phoenix proper limped along on reduced resources. The most damning piece came from my own archived storage drive, the one I'd kept synced to the company's enterprise cloud before I left. Crestline had pulled the full audit trail. Someone had accessed my folder on November 22nd, the day before Victor sent the doctored board report. The login: Ethan Hale, using an admin override token Victor had granted him 2 months earlier. Files copied, then deleted from my side of the shared drive. The system logs showed permanent purge, initiated from his machine. I sat back in my home office chair, the rain tapping against the window like impatient fingers. My encrypted personal folder, the one I'd built month after month, was suddenly invaluable. I uploaded it to Crestline's secure portal. Every screenshot, every red line comparison, and every time-stamped email where I'd first proposed the ideas now credited to Ethan. Side-by-side diffs of reports before and after the modernization. Audio snippets from all hands where Victor had praised youthful energy over dated methods. Sarah called me that evening on an encrypted line. "We've got enough for intent," she said without preamble. The pattern isn't sloppy, it's deliberate. Backdating, IP theft from your archive, unauthorized budget diversion, falsified projections submitted to the board. This crosses from poor governance into securities fraud territory if public disclosures were affected. We're looping in legal tomorrow. I exhaled slowly. What happens next? We keep building the chronology. You stay invisible. When we present to the Crestline Investment Committee in January, we'll have a clean narrative. Who built Phoenix, who claimed it, who covered it up. Victor will be given the chance to explain. He won't have one. I paused. And Julian? Julian's cooperating quietly, Sarah said. He's the one who flagged the initial discrepancies to us last fall. He's protected by whistleblower provisions, but he's made it clear he wants the truth out, not a war. Crestline doesn't want to destroy Carver Hale. We want to fix it. That starts with cleaning house. I looked at the open data room on my second monitor. Pages of manipulated spreadsheets stared back at me. For years I'd told myself the work would speak for itself. It hadn't. Not inside those walls, but here, outside them, in a quiet room with nothing but data and timestamps, the work was finally screaming. I closed the laptop. I'll have the full annotated timeline to you by Friday, I told Sarah. Good, she said. We move fast now. I ended the call and stood at the window, watching the city lights smear across the wet glass. The truth wasn't going to stay buried anymore, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one carrying it alone. The email from Crestline Partners hit every board member's inbox at 8:17 a.m. on January 15, 2026. Subject: Urgent. Forensic audit findings. Carver Hale Group/Phoenix Project. No pleasantries in the body, just a single attached PDF, 87 pages, stamped confidential for board review only, and a cover note from Sarah Nguyen. Immediate special meeting recommended. Materials speak for themselves. By 10 a.m., the emergency board session was convened in the same glass-walled conference room where I'd once placed my resignation letter on the table. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. I was already 3 weeks into my Crestline engagement, watching the fallout unfold through encrypted updates from Sarah. Julian Carver called the meeting to order at 10:05 sharp. No small talk? No agenda preamble? He simply opened the floor with a voice so flat it could have been carved from ice. Victor, Ethan, you've both read the Crestline report. Explain. The room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. Victor sat at the head of the table, where he always sat, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, trying to project the same calm authority he'd wielded for years. Ethan was beside him, paler than usual, fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the edge of his laptop. Victor cleared his throat. This is an overreach, he began. Crestline is using selective data to paint a distorted picture. Yes, there were revisions to reports, standard practice to streamline messaging for the board. Projections were adjusted to reflect more realistic optimism based on emerging user metrics. Budget reallocations were strategic, approved at the executive level. Julian cut him off without raising his voice. Approved by whom, exactly? The audit shows 6 unauthorized transfers, totaling $1.2 million to a shadow project with no charter, no cross-functional sign-off, and invoices routed through Ethan's personal expense code. Your countersignature is on everyone. Victor opened his mouth, closed it. The room felt smaller. Ethan jumped in, a voice higher than normal. Look, this is being blown out of proportion. The numbers were directionally correct. We needed to move fast. If anything, the original conservative models were holding us back. Lena's approach was cautious, too cautious. She resisted every pivot. I was trying to save the timeline. A ripple of disbelief moved through the other directors. Priya from finance leaned forward. Ethan, the original models weren't cautious. They were accurate. The audit reconciles them to actuals within 2%. Your revised forecasts overstated revenue by 40 to 60% in 3 consecutive quarters. That's not optimism, that's fabrication. Victor tried again, leaning toward Julian. Julian, you know me. 22 years. I built this place with you. This is a misunderstanding. A Crestline is angling for control. They're weaponizing old version histories to... Julian raised one hand. The gesture was small, but it silenced the room like a gunshot. I've seen the version histories, he said. I've seen the access logs showing Ethan logged into Lena Vu's archive drive after she resigned, copied files, then purged them. I've seen the redacted risk disclosures that could have exposed us to 7-figure penalties. And I've seen the pattern of credit reassignment that started long before Crestline ever knocked on our door. He paused, letting the words settle. Lena documented everything. Timestamps, emails, diffs, audio from all hands. She didn't need to embellish. The truth was already there, buried under layers of your edits. Ethan's face flushed red. She's bitter. She quit because she couldn't adapt. And this is revenge. Enough! Julian's voice didn't rise, but it carried finality. The board has reviewed the full forensic package. We're not debating intent anymore. We're addressing consequences." He turned to the rest of the table. "Motion on the floor. Ethan Hale is removed from all operational authority effective immediately. No severance acceleration, no equity vesting acceleration beyond what's already vested. Victor Hale is placed on administrative leave pending full independent investigation. If findings confirm material misrepresentation to the board and potential securities violations, termination without cause will follow." A beat of stunned silence. Priya seconded the motion. Hands went up around the table, one by one, no dissent. Victor stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Ethan looked like he'd been slapped. Julian continued, addressing the room but clearly speaking to his former right-hand man. "You had every opportunity to course correct. You chose escalation instead. That ends today." Victor finally spoke, voice low. "And Lena?" Julian's gaze didn't waver. "The board will issue a formal written acknowledgement of her contributions to Phoenix, an apology for the misattribution of her work and the mishandling of her departure. We'll offer full reinstatement if she wants it. Title, equity adjustment, reporting line direct to me, but I suspect she won't take it. She's already found a better home." Victor let out a short, bitter laugh. "So that's it. She walks away clean, and we're the villains." "You made yourselves the villains," Julian said quietly. "She just kept the receipts." The vote passed unanimously. Ethan was escorted out by security within the hour, laptop confiscated, access revoked. Victor left under his own power, but the weight of the room followed him down the hallway. Later that afternoon, Sarah forwarded me the meeting minutes and a draft of the board's letter to me. It was brief, professional, contrite. They admitted errors in attribution, acknowledged the integrity of my documentation, and expressed regret for the environment that led to my resignation. I read it twice, then closed the email. Outside my apartment window, the Saigon River glittered under a late afternoon sun. Different city, different life, same truth finally breaking the surface. I didn't feel triumph. Not exactly. I felt something quieter. Release. The collapse wasn't loud, it was precise, surgical. And when the dust settled, the only thing left standing was the record I'd kept, quietly, relentlessly, for years. That was enough. Julian suggested the meeting himself. Neutral ground, no offices, no titles hanging over us. Just a small cafe tucked behind Nguyen Hue Walking Street in Ho Chi Minh City, the kind of place where the coffee comes strong and black and the tables are far enough apart that conversations stay private. I arrived early, ordered an iced ca pe suaja, and watched the late afternoon light slant across the pavement while motorbikes flowed past in endless silver rivers. He walked in at exactly 4 o'clock, still in a crisp white shirt but no tie, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He looked older than he had in the Portland boardroom, lines around his eyes deeper, shoulders carrying something heavier than jet lag. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, and sat across from me without ceremony. "You didn't have to come all this way," I said. "I did," he replied. "Some things can't be said over Zoom." He let the silence sit for a moment, then spoke. "I let you walk out that day in November because I knew what was coming." Victor had already crossed lines I couldn't publicly acknowledge without tipping my hand. If you'd stayed, even if I'd fought for you, he would have painted you as the obstacle, the bitter holdover blocking progress. Your evidence would have looked like retaliation instead of record-keeping. By resigning cleanly, you gave yourself distance. More importantly, you gave Crestline a witness they could trust completely. Untainted. I stirred the condensed milk at the bottom of my glass, watching it swirl into amber clouds. "Shh, you could have warned me sooner." "I could have," he admitted. "I didn't. I told myself I was protecting the company. What I was really doing was delaying the inevitable. I'm sorry for that." The apology landed quietly without flourish. I didn't need more than that. Julian reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a slim folder, simple manila, no branding. He slid it across the table. "This isn't reinstatement," he said. "Carver Hale is in transition. Crestline will take a controlling stake by March. Victor's gone, Ethan's gone, the board is being refreshed, but I'm not asking you to come back." I opened the folder. Inside, a letter of intent from Crestline Partners, addressed to me. An independent partner, operational architecture and portfolio execution, multi-year engagement, lead design and governance for high-priority portfolio companies, full autonomy in methodology, team structure, and reporting equity participation in select investments, base compensation, $280,000 annually plus performance carry. I read it twice. No dotted line yet, just the framework. "You'd report to Sarah Nguyen directly," Julian said. "No one else. You set the cadence. You choose the tools. You build the truth layer that should have existed from the beginning. Crestline isn't buying drama. They're buying competence. Yours." I closed the folder and looked at him. "Why me? After everything?" "Because you never stopped keeping score," he said simply. "Not for revenge, for accuracy." "That's rarer than you think." We sat in silence while the cafe filled with the after-work crowd, students laughing, couples sharing one straw between two glasses of trasua. Outside, the sun was dropping fast, painting the street in long gold shadows. I signed the acceptance page right there, using the pen he offered. No ceremony, just ink on paper. Julian stood first. He extended his hand, not a corporate handshake, but something warmer. "You're free now, Lena. Not just from Victor, from having to prove yourself in a room that refused to see you." I shook his hand. "I always was," I said. "It just took longer to realize it." He left first, disappearing into the crowd on the walking street. I stayed a little longer, finishing my coffee as the light softened into dusk. When I finally stepped outside, the air was warm and thick with the smell of grilled corn and exhaust. I walked west along the riverfront, past the Bitexco Tower glowing against the twilight sky, past couples taking selfies on the pedestrian bridge, past the street musicians playing soft acoustic covers of old Trin Kong Son songs. My phone buzzed once, a confirmation email from Sarah Nguyen. "Welcome aboard. First call next week. Bring your timelines." I smiled, small, private, and kept walking. The old weight was gone. Not because the past had vanished, but because it no longer defined the path ahead. I wasn't the one who'd been erased anymore. I was the one building what came next. And for the first time in years, the future felt wide open, quiet, steady, entirely mine.